They told me it was all in my head, that I was too young, too healthy, too anxious. 3 different doctors, 4 emergency room visits, in countless dismissals later, I collapsed in a grocery store parking lot with a massive heart attack. I was 19 years old. My name is Kathy Williamson, and this is the story of how the medical system almost killed me, and how I fought back to reclaim my life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I grew up in Riverside, California, in a modest 2-bedroom house on Magnolia Street, where the paint was always peeling and the air conditioner only worked when it felt like it. My mom, Sandra, worked double shifts as a nurse at Riverside Community Hospital, which I always found darkly ironic given what would happen to me later. My dad left when I was 7, and honestly, I barely remember him except for the smell of cigarette smoke and the sound of the front door slamming. By the time I was 19, I'd become really good at being invisible. Not in a sad, bullied kind of way. I had friends, decent grades, a part-time job at a coffee shop called The Daily Grind on University Avenue. I was just ordinary. Forgettable. The kind of person who blends into the background of every group photo, who never causes drama, who always says, "I'm fine," even when I'm not. I was in my second year at Riverside City College studying graphic design because I was decent at art and had no idea what else to do with my life. My best friend, Maya Torres, was the opposite of me in every way. Loud, confident, always dating someone new, always dragging me to parties I didn't want to attend. She lived in the moment. I lived in the future, constantly worrying about assignments, bills, whether my mom was okay, whether I'd ever amount to anything. That's probably why when the chest pains started in late September, everyone assumed it was anxiety. It began on a Tuesday morning. I remember because Tuesdays were my long days. Classes from 8 until 3, then a shift at the coffee shop until closing at 9. I was sitting in my Introduction to Digital Media class, half listening to Professor Henderson drone on about Adobe Illustrator shortcuts, when I felt this weird pressure in my chest. Not pain exactly, more like someone had placed a heavy textbook on my sternum and was slowly adding more weight. I shifted in my seat, took a deep breath, rolled my shoulders. The pressure didn't go away, but it didn't get worse either. I figured I'd slept wrong, or maybe I was coming down with something. By the time class ended, I'd mostly forgotten about it. But it came back that night during my shift. I was making a vanilla latte for a regular customer, Mr. Patterson, who always ordered the same thing and always left exactly $2 in the tip jar, when the pressure returned. This time it was stronger, accompanied by a strange tightness that made it hard to take a full breath. I gripped the edge of the counter, waiting for it to pass. "You okay, sweetie?" Mr. Patterson asked, his bushy gray eyebrows knitting together with concern. "Yeah, totally fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just need to drink more water, probably." The feeling subsided after a few minutes, and I convinced myself it was nothing. Stress. Exhaustion. I'd been pulling late nights working on a design project for class, living on coffee and whatever leftovers my mom brought home from the hospital cafeteria. My body was probably just telling me to slow down. Except it kept happening. Over the next 2 weeks, the chest pressure became a regular visitor. Sometimes it lasted 30 seconds, sometimes 10 minutes. It would strike randomly, in the middle of grocery shopping, while I was sketching in my notebook, during a conversation with Maya about her latest relationship drama. I started keeping track in my phone's notes app, trying to find a pattern. Morning or evening, after eating, during stress. There was no pattern. It was completely random, which somehow made it more terrifying. Maya was the first person I told. We were sitting in her beat-up Honda Civic in the college parking lot, splitting a burrito from the taco truck when another episode hit. I must have made a face because she immediately noticed. "What's wrong?" she asked, putting down her food. "Nothing, just this weird chest thing again." "Chest thing? Kathy, what are you talking about?" So I explained, the pressure, the tightness, the randomness of it all. Maya's expression shifted from concern to something that looked almost like relief. "Oh my God! You're having panic attacks," she said, as if she had just solved a mystery. "My cousin Rachel gets them all the time. It's anxiety. Have you been stressed lately?" I thought about it. I mean, I was always somewhat stressed. Money was tight, my mom was tired all the time, I was worried about my future. But wasn't everyone stressed? That was just life. I guess so, I said uncertainly. Trust me, it's anxiety, Maya said with confidence. Rachel says it feels exactly like you're describing, like you can't breathe, like something's sitting on your chest. You should probably see someone about it, but it's definitely not dangerous or anything. It's just your brain being dramatic. But deep down, something felt off. This didn't feel psychological. It felt physical, real, like something was genuinely wrong inside my body. I just didn't know how to articulate that difference. And I definitely didn't trust my own judgment enough to push back against Maya's confident diagnosis. My mom had the same reaction when I mentioned it to her later that week. We were eating microwaved lasagna at our small kitchen table, the TV murmuring in the background, when I casually brought up the chest pressure. "Sounds like anxiety, honey," she said, not even looking up from her plate. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from another 12-hour shift. "You're taking a full course load, working, probably not sleeping enough. Your body's telling you to take it easy." "But it feels really physical, Mom, like really physical." She finally looked at me, and I saw a flicker of concern cross her face before she smoothed it away with practiced nurse efficiency. "Physical symptoms of anxiety are real symptoms, Kathy. Your mind and body aren't separate things. Anxiety can cause chest pain, shortness of breath, dizziness, all kinds of stuff. If it keeps happening, maybe we can look into getting you something for it. Some therapy or maybe a low-dose anxiety medication." I nodded, pushing lasagna around my plate. She was a nurse. She would know. And she was probably right about me being stressed and not taking care of myself. I made a mental note to try yoga or meditation or whatever people did for anxiety these days. The episodes continued through October. Some days I'd have 2 or 3, other days, nothing. I started developing strategies to cope. Breathing exercises I found on YouTube, avoiding caffeine, leaving parties early when I felt one coming on. I told myself I was managing it, that I was being responsible and adult about my mental health. Then came the night of October 28th, and everything changed. I was at Maya's apartment for a small Halloween party. Nothing crazy, just 8 or 9 people hanging out, eating pizza, watching horror movies. I'd dressed as a witch, which required minimal effort. Black dress, black hat, done. Maya was a sexy vampire, because of course she was. We were halfway through some slasher film I wasn't really watching when the chest pressure returned. But this time it was stronger, more insistent, and it was accompanied by a new sensation, a shooting of pain down my left arm that made me gasp. "You okay?" Maya whispered, leaning close. "Yeah, just another one," I managed, but my voice sounded weird even to my own ears. The pain intensified. My left arm felt heavy, strange, like it belonged to someone else. The room suddenly felt too hot, too crowded, too loud. I stood up abruptly, mumbling something about needing air, and stumbled toward Maya's small balcony. The cool October night hit my face, but it didn't help. If anything, I felt worse. The pain was spreading now, radiating across my chest and into my jaw. I gripped the balcony railing, my knuckles going white. This wasn't anxiety. Every cell in my body was screaming that something was desperately, terrifyingly wrong. Maya appeared beside me, her vampire fangs hanging slightly crooked. "Kathy, you look really pale. Do you want me to take you home?" "I think," I started, but the words got stuck. "I think I need to go to the hospital." Her eyes widened. "Like now? Should I call 911? "No, no," I said quickly, already second-guessing myself. What if it was just anxiety and I was being dramatic? What if I wasted everyone's time? Just, can you drive me, please? 20 minutes later, we pulled up to the emergency entrance of Riverside Community Hospital, the same hospital where my mom worked, though thankfully she wasn't on shift that night. The waiting room was moderately busy, the usual mix of injuries and illnesses that populate ERs on Saturday nights. I walked up to the triage desk, my left arm still aching, my chest still tight. The nurse looked up at me with practiced assessment. "What brings you in tonight?" I said, "Chest pain and my left arm hurts." She took my vitals quickly and efficiently. Blood pressure normal. Heart rate slightly elevated but nothing alarming. Oxygen levels perfect. How old are you? 19. I watched her expression shift ever so slightly. She smiled reassuringly. Okay, honey, have a seat in the waiting room and we'll get you back as soon as we can. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The fluorescent lights in the ER waiting room buzzed with a persistent hum that made my headache worse. Maya sat beside me, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up to ask if I was okay. I kept saying yes, but honestly, I didn't know anymore. The pain in my arm had dulled to a persistent ache, and the chest pressure had eased slightly, which made me feel both relieved and stupid for even coming. An hour passed, then another. I watched people come and go, a guy with a badly swollen ankle, a little kid with a fever, an elderly woman clutching her side. They all seemed to get called back before me. I understood triage, knew that more serious cases went first, but sitting there in limbo made the anxiety I supposedly had feel very real. Maybe we should just go home, I whispered to Maya around midnight. I feel better now. This is dumb. Are you insane? She hissed back. We've been here for 2 hours. You're seeing a doctor. Finally, at 1:30 in the morning, a nurse called my name. Maya squeezed my hand before I followed the nurse through the double doors into the treatment area. I was led to a small examination room with pale blue curtains and the smell of antiseptic that reminded me of visiting my mom at work when I was younger. Change into this gown, opening in the back, the nurse said, handing me a folded bundle of fabric. Dr. Patel will be with you shortly. Shortly turned out to be another 40 minutes. I sat on the examination table in the flimsy gown, my clothes folded neatly on the chair, feeling exposed and increasingly foolish. The chest pain was completely gone now. My arm felt normal. What was I even doing here? When Dr. Patel finally entered, he looked exactly how I imagined an ER doctor at 2 in the morning would look. Tired, slightly rumpled, moving with the efficient weariness of someone who'd seen everything. He was probably in his 40s, with graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses. Kathy Williamson, he said, glancing at the tablet in his hand. Says here you're having chest pain and left arm pain. Tell me what's going on. I explained everything. The weeks of intermittent chest pressure, tonight's escalation, the shooting pain down my arm, the tightness in my jaw. As I talked, I watched his expression, trying to read what he was thinking. He nodded occasionally, asked a few follow-up questions about family history, none that I knew of, medications, none, smoking or drug use, no and no. Any recent stressors in your life? School, work, relationships? I mean, the usual stuff, I guess. I'm in college, I work part-time, nothing major. He nodded again, that knowing nod that medical professionals do. I'm going to run an EKG and some blood work, but I want you to know that what you're describing sounds very consistent with anxiety and panic attacks, which are extremely common in young women your age. There it was. The same explanation everyone had been giving me, but now with a medical degree behind it. But the arm pain, I started, can absolutely be caused by anxiety, he interrupted gently. Panic attacks can mimic heart attack symptoms almost perfectly. It's actually one of the most common reasons young people come to the ER. Your vital signs are all normal. You're 19 years old with no risk factors. I'm not saying we won't check everything, but I'd be very surprised if this was cardiac related. The EKG took about 10 minutes. A technician attached electrodes to my chest, wrists, and ankles, and the machine produced a printout that looked like a seismographer reading. She took it without comment and disappeared. Then a phlebotomist came in and drew several vials of blood, more than I expected, which at least made me feel like they were taking this seriously. Then, more waiting. I texted Maya updates, watched the clock on the wall tick past 3 in the morning, listened to the muffled sounds of the ER beyond my curtain, voices, beeping machines, someone crying in pain several rooms away. Dr. Patel returned around 3:30, the same tired expression on his face. Good news, he said. Your EKG is completely normal and your blood work looks great. Cardiac enzymes are negative, which means there's no damage to your heart muscle. Everything points to this being anxiety-related. I should have felt relieved. Part of me did. But another part felt dismissed, like I'd failed some kind of test by not having something visibly wrong with me. "So what do I do?" I asked. "I'm going to give you some information about some breathing techniques for managing anxiety, and I'd recommend following up with your primary care doctor about possibly starting an anti-anxiety medication or seeing a therapist. For tonight, you're free to go home. If the symptoms return and get worse, you can come back, but honestly, learning to manage your stress is going to be your best treatment." He handed me a photocopied sheet about panic attack management, the same generic information I'd already found on Google, and a discharge summary. Just like that, I was done. No further testing, no follow-up scheduled, just a pat on the head and a suggestion that my brain was playing tricks on me. Maya drove me home in silence. The sun was starting to hint at rising, turning that sky that deep blue-black of pre-dawn. I felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. "At least you know it's nothing serious," Maya offered as she pulled up to my house. "Yeah, at least there's that." But I didn't believe it. Something still felt wrong, lurking beneath the surface like a shadow I couldn't quite see. I slept until noon, then dragged myself through the rest of Sunday in a fog. My mom had left for another shift before I woke up, so I had the house to myself. I tried to do homework, couldn't focus, ended up watching mindless TV and eating cereal for dinner. The chest pressure returned on Monday afternoon during my typography class. Same feeling, same location, but this time I was prepared. I did the breathing exercises from the photocopied sheet. I told myself it was just anxiety. I wrote it out until it passed, feeling both triumphant and terrified. Tuesday was worse. 3 episodes, each one lasting longer than the last. Wednesday brought 4. By Thursday, I was having them so frequently that I almost got used to them. Almost. The unpredictability was the worst part. I never knew when the next one would hit, which made me constantly tense, which probably made the anxiety worse, which probably caused more episodes. It was an exhausting cycle. On Friday, I had to leave work early when an episode hit during the afternoon rush. My manager, Derek, was understanding but clearly annoyed. "Look, Kathy, I get that you're dealing with stuff, but I need reliable people on the schedule. If this keeps happening, we might need to reduce your hours." I nodded, apologized, grabbed my things, and fled. The November air was cold as I walked to the bus stop, and I remember thinking that I couldn't afford to lose hours at work. My mom and I were barely making ends meet as it was. But I also couldn't control when these episodes happened, which meant I couldn't promise they'd stop disrupting my shifts. That night, I made the mistake of Googling my symptoms. I know, never Google symptoms. But I was desperate for answers that made sense, for something that matched what I was feeling beyond just anxiety. The results were a mix of reassuring and terrifying. Anxiety, panic attacks, GERD, costochondritis, muscle strain, all benign explanations that seemed possible. But then there were the other results, the ones I tried not to click on but couldn't help myself. Heart attack symptoms in young women, cardiac arrest, congenital heart defects. I fell down a research rabbit hole, reading medical journals I barely understood, watching YouTube videos of people describing their heart attacks. What struck me was how many young women in their 20s, 30s, even teenagers, described being dismissed by doctors, told they were too young, too healthy, too anxious. Some of them found out the truth in time. Some of them didn't. By 2 in the morning, I'd scared myself into a full-blown panic attack, or at least what I assumed was a panic attack. My heart raced, my chest tightened, my breathing became shallow and rapid. I paced my small bedroom, trying to calm down, eventually sitting on the floor with my back against the bed, hugging my knees to my chest. This was my life now. This constant fear, this physical manifestation of anxiety,
this inability to trust my own body. I was 19 years old, and I felt like I was falling apart. The weekend brought a brief respite. Fewer episodes, less intense when they did happen. I convinced myself that maybe the ER doctor was right. Maybe I just needed to manage my stress better. I skipped a party Maya invited me to, stayed home, took a long bath, went to bed early. Sunday evening, I was feeling almost normal again. Almost hopeful. I made plans to talk to my academic advisor about lightening my course load next semester, mentally drafted a budget to see if I could work fewer hours at the coffee shop, even looked up therapists who accepted our insurance. I went to bed that night thinking that maybe, just maybe, I was going to figure this out. I had no idea that in less than 2 weeks, I'd be fighting for my life in a way that would make all of this seem like a gentle warning I'd failed to heed.
November arrived with unseasonably cold weather and a determination on my part to just push through whatever was happening to me. If it was anxiety, then I needed to prove to myself and everyone else that I could handle it, that I wasn't weak, that I wasn't going to let some panic attacks derail my entire life. So I doubled down on everything. I went to all my classes, picked up extra shifts at the daily grind when Derek asked, said yes to every social invitation Maya extended. I was going to be normal if it killed me. Looking back, I realize how darkly prophetic that thought was. The second week of November, Professor Henderson assigned our major project, a complete branding package for a fictional company, due in 3 weeks. Logo, color palette, typography, business cards, letterhead, social media templates. It was worth 40% of our grade. I threw myself into it with manic energy, spending hours in the computer lab, perfecting every pixel, every shade, every curve. I barely noticed when the chest episodes started happening during these work sessions. Or rather, I noticed but chose to ignore them. I'd pause, breathe through the pressure, and get right back to work. It became just another thing to manage, like hunger or needing to use the bathroom. An inconvenience, nothing more. Maya noticed, though. We were at a diner on a Wednesday night, supposedly studying but mostly gossiping about people from our high school who'd gotten engaged or pregnant or both, when an episode hit mid-sentence. I stopped talking, closed my eyes, pressed my hand to my chest. Again? Maya asked, her voice sharp with concern. Kathy, that's like the 4th time tonight. I'm fine, I said automatically. It passes. Did you ever follow up with a doctor like they said about the anxiety medication or therapy? I don't need medication, I snapped, surprising both of us with my vehemence. I'm not broken. I just need to get through the semester. She held up her hands defensively. Okay. I'm just worried about you. Well, don't be. I'm handling it. Except I wasn't. Not really. The episodes were increasing in frequency and intensity. I was having trouble sleeping because I'd wake up with chest pressure in the middle of the night. My appetite disappeared. Food seemed to trigger symptoms. So I started eating less. I lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks without trying, which Maya said was great, which made me feel even more isolated because this wasn't great. This was my body deteriorating, and everyone around me either didn't notice or thought it was positive. Work became a nightmare. I started making mistakes, wrong orders, incorrect change, forgetting to restock supplies. Derek pulled me aside on a Thursday afternoon, his expression a mixture of frustration and concern. What's going on with you, Kathy? You're usually so reliable, but lately you're all over the place. I know. I'm sorry. I've just been dealing with some health stuff. The anxiety thing? News traveled fast in a small coffee shop. Yeah. He sighed, running his hand through his thinning hair. Look, I like you. You're a good kid. But this is a business. I need people who can show up and do the job. I'm cutting you down to 2 shifts a week until you get this sorted out. 2 shifts. That was barely 15 hours, maybe $200 every 2 weeks if I was lucky. We needed that money. My mom needed that money. But I couldn't argue because he was right. I was unreliable. I was making mistakes. I was barely holding it together. I left work that day feeling like a failure. The November wind bit through my jacket as I walked to the bus stop, and I was so lost in my own misery that I almost missed the bus when it arrived. I slumped into a seat near the back, staring out the window at the gray sky, fighting back tears. That night, my mom was actually home for dinner, a rare occurrence. I'd picked up McDonald's on the way home because I didn't have the energy to cook, and we sat at the kitchen table, picking out our food in tired silence. She looked thin, she said finally, studying me with her nurse's eye. Are you eating enough? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Mom, I'm fine. Just stressed with school. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was rough from constant hand washing, her grip warm and familiar. Baby, I know I haven't been around much lately. The hospital's been crazy, and I'm picking up extra shifts to cover the car repairs, but I'm still your mom. Talk to me. So I did. I told her about the increasing episodes, about the ER visit, about the anxiety diagnosis. I told her about losing hours at work, about struggling to focus in class, about feeling like I was drowning, and everyone just kept telling me to swim harder. She listened without interrupting, her face growing more troubled with each word. When she finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I think you should see a cardiologist, she said finally. My heart jumped. Really? But the ER doctor said, I know what the ER doctor said, but you're my daughter, and something doesn't feel right to me. The symptoms you're describing, the frequency, the fact that they're getting worse instead of better. I'd feel better if a specialist took a look, just to rule everything out completely. Hope bloomed in my chest, sharp and desperate. Okay, yes. How do we do that? You'll need a referral from a primary care doctor. Do you have one? I shook my head. I hadn't been to a regular doctor since I was probably 16. All right, we'll get you established with someone. I'll make some calls tomorrow, see who's taking new patients. It might take a few weeks to get in. A few weeks. I could do a few weeks. I had already made it this far. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The following Monday started like any other. I dragged myself to my 8 a.m. class, Introduction to Color Theory, and settled into my usual seat near the back. Professor Martinez was discussing complementary colors, but I was having trouble focusing. My chest felt tight from the moment I woke up, and there was a strange heaviness that I couldn't shake. Halfway through class, the tightness intensified into full-blown pain. Not pressure this time. Actual, sharp, stabbing pain that made me gasp audibly. The girl next to me glanced over, startled. I stood up abruptly, mumbling an apology, and stumbled out of the classroom. The hallway was empty and blessedly quiet. I leaned against the wall, trying to breathe through the pain, but it wasn't passing this time. If anything, it was getting worse. My left arm started tingling, then my jaw began to ache. Sweat broke out on my forehead despite the cool temperature in the building. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called Maya. She didn't answer. She was probably in class. I tried my mom. Voicemail. She was at work, wouldn't be able to answer. The pain was radiating now, spreading across my entire chest like someone had lit a fire inside my ribcage. The hallway tilted sickeningly. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my vision starting to tunnel at the edges. A professor I didn't recognize appeared in my narrowing field of vision, his mouth moving. I couldn't hear what he was saying over the roaring in my ears. Hospital. Need hospital. Everything got confused after that. There were voices, hands helping me, someone saying they'd called 911. I remember thinking that this was dramatic, that I was causing a scene, that everyone would think I was overreacting. I remember the paramedics arriving, their calm efficiency as they loaded me onto a stretcher. I remember the ambulance ride, the sirens wailing, one of the EMTs asking me questions I could barely answer. I remember arriving at the ER, a different one this time, County General, closer to the college.
and being rushed through triage immediately. No waiting room this time. They took me seriously now, and some distant part of my brain understood that this meant things were very, very wrong. They hooked me up to monitors, started an IV, performed another EKG. There were more people around me than before, moving with urgent purpose. Someone kept asking if I'd taken any drugs. No, I kept saying, nothing, I don't do drugs. A doctor appeared, younger than Dr. Patel, with kind eyes and a stethoscope around her neck. Kathy, I'm Dr. Reynolds. Your EKG is showing some abnormalities. We're going to run more tests, but I need you to stay calm, okay? We're taking good care of you. Abnormalities. That word cut through the fog of pain and fear. Abnormalities meant something was actually wrong. Abnormalities meant I hadn't been crazy or dramatic or anxious. Abnormalities meant I'd been right all along. But I could see it in her eyes, in the way the nurses moved with controlled urgency, in the atmosphere of barely contained alarm that filled the room. Something was very wrong with my heart, and we were almost out of time to fix it.
The cardiac unit at County General was nothing like the general ER. Everything moved faster, with sharper focus. I'd been admitted within an hour of arriving, transferred from the emergency department to a room on the third floor where machines beeped constantly and nurses checked on me every 20 minutes. My mom arrived around noon, still in her scrubs from her shift at Riverside Community. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She'd been crying, which scared me more than anything else that had happened. My mom didn't cry. She was the strong one, the one who held everything together. "Baby," she said, rushing to my bedside and grabbing my hand. "I got here as fast as I could. What are they saying?" "They don't know yet," I told her. "They're running more tests, something about enzyme levels and an echocardiogram." She nodded, understanding the medical terminology better than I did. "Did they give you anything for the pain?" "Yeah, it's better now. They said a cardiologist is coming to talk to us." We waited together in that sterile room, her hand wrapped around mine, both of us afraid to voice what we were thinking. The TV mounted on the wall played some daytime talk show on mute, the closed captions scrolling meaningless words across the bottom of the screen. Dr. James Chen arrived around 2 in the afternoon. He was maybe 50, with gray streaking his black hair and an expression that managed to be both serious and reassuring. He pulled up a chair next to my bed, a tablet in his hands, and introduced himself as the head of cardiology. "Kathy, Mrs. Williamson, I've reviewed all of Kathy's test results from today and the records from her previous ER visit. I also want to hear directly from Kathy about what she's been experiencing. Can you walk me through everything from the beginning?" So I told the story again. But this time, Dr. Chen didn't interrupt with suggestions about anxiety. He listened intently, occasionally making notes on his tablet, asking specific questions about timing, intensity, and associated symptoms. When I mentioned that the first ER doctor had diagnosed it as panic attacks, I saw something flicker across his face. Not quite anger, but close. "Kathy," he said, when I finished, "I'm going to be direct with you because I think you deserve honesty. You have a condition called spontaneous coronary artery dissection, or SCAD. It's a tear in one of the blood vessels in your heart. It's rare, especially in someone your age, which is why it was missed initially." The words landed like physical blows. Tear, heart, rare, missed. "A heart condition?" my mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But she's 19. She doesn't smoke. She's not overweight. There's no family history." "SCAD is different from typical coronary artery disease," Dr. Chen explained. "It predominantly affects young, healthy women with few traditional risk factors. We don't fully understand what causes it. Sometimes it's related to hormones, sometimes extreme physical or emotional stress, sometimes it just happens. The chest pain you've been experiencing for weeks, those were likely smaller dissections or warning signs. What happened today was more significant." "Did I have a heart attack?" I asked, my voice sounding strange and distant even to my own ears. "You had what we call a cardiac event. Your heart muscle was temporarily deprived of adequate blood flow.
The good news is that we caught it. You're here, and we can treat this. But Kathy, I need you to understand something important. This is serious. If you had continued ignoring these symptoms, if you hadn't come in today, the outcome could have been very different. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. I thought about all the times I'd pushed through the pain, convinced myself it was nothing, been told by others it was just anxiety. I thought about how close I'd come to not calling for help today, to just waiting it out in that hallway. "What happens now?" my mom asked, her nurse training kicking in even through her fear. "We're going to keep Kathy here for observation and run more detailed imaging, specifically a cardiac catheterization, to map exactly what's happening with her coronary arteries. Depending on what we find, treatment can range from medication and careful monitoring to possible intervention. SCAD is tricky because traditional treatments for heart disease don't always work the same way." "Surgery?" I asked. "Possibly, but not necessarily. Many SCAD patients heal on their own with careful management. The artery can repair itself over time, but we need to understand the extent of the damage first." He paused, looking between my mom and I. "I also want to be clear about something else. Kathy, you advocated for yourself by coming back today. Your instinct that something physically was wrong, that was correct. I'm sorry the first medical team didn't take it more seriously." Those words, "you were right," hit me harder than the diagnosis itself. Tears started streaming down my face, months of dismissed fear and self-doubt finally breaking through. My mom pulled me into a hug, careful of the IV lines and monitor wires. "It's okay, baby. We're going to get through this. You're going to be okay." But would I? An hour ago, I thought I was a healthy teenager with an anxiety problem. Now, I was a cardiac patient with a potentially life-threatening condition. Everything had shifted, and I didn't know how to process it. The cardiac catheterization was scheduled for the next morning. They explained the procedure, threading a catheter through an artery in my wrist up to my heart, injecting dye, taking detailed images. It sounded terrifying, but Dr. Chen assured me it was routine, that I'd be sedated, that it was the best way to see exactly what we were dealing with.
That night in the hospital was the longest of my life. My mom stayed, sleeping in the uncomfortable chair next to my bed, waking every time a nurse came in to check vitals or adjust medications. Maya came by after her classes ended, bringing my laptop and phone charger, her usual confidence subdued by the reality of seeing me hooked up to heart monitors. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," she said quietly, sitting on the edge of my bed. "When you kept saying it felt physical, I should have listened." "You couldn't have known," I told her, though part of me was still hurt by how easily she'd dismissed my concerns. "Still, I'm your best friend. I should have been more supportive instead of just assuming the doctors were right." After she left, I lay in the dark, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Each beep a reminder that my heart, the organ I'd never given much thought to before, was damaged, broken, actively trying to kill me. I thought about all the plans I'd made for my future. Finishing college, starting a career in design, maybe moving out of Riverside to somewhere bigger and more exciting, traveling, falling in love, all the normal things 19-year-olds think they have endless time for. Now, I didn't know if I had time for any of it. But somewhere in that long, dark night, something shifted inside me. The fear was still there, sharp and constant, but underneath it grew something else, a fierce determination. I'd spent weeks being told nothing was wrong, gaslighting myself into believing everyone else knew my body better than I did. I'd been made to feel dramatic, anxious, weak. But I wasn't any of those things. I was sick, actually, physically sick with something rare and dangerous. And if I was going to survive this, I needed to stop apologizing for taking up space in the medical system. I needed to stop being the good patient who accepted every dismissal with a polite nod. I needed to fight. The catheterization the next morning confirmed what Dr. Chen suspected. I had a dissection in my left anterior descending artery, the one they call the widowmaker because blockages there are so often fatal. The tear was significant, but miraculously hadn't completely blocked blood flow.
I'd been walking around for weeks with a ticking bomb in my chest. "You're incredibly lucky," Dr. Chen told me afterward, when I was back in my room, groggy from sedation. "Many people with this type of SCAD don't make it to the hospital." Lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt angry. Angry at the first ER doctor who dismissed me. Angry at a system that was so quick to attribute young women's symptoms to anxiety. Angry that I'd lost weeks where I could have been getting proper treatment. But I also felt something else, a clarity of purpose I'd never experienced before. What do I need to do, Dr. Chen? To get better, to survive this, what do I need to do? He smiled slightly, recognizing something in my tone. First, we manage this medically. Medications to reduce strain on your heart, careful monitoring, lifestyle modifications. Then we wait and watch. The artery may heal on its own, or we may need to intervene. Either way, you're going to be working closely with me and my team for a long time. Okay, then let's get started. My mom squeezed my hand, pride mixing with fear in her eyes. This was it. This was my commitment, not just to treatment, but to being my own advocate, to trusting my instincts, and to fighting for my life even when others told me there was nothing to fight. I was 19 years old with a broken heart, but I wasn't giving up without a battle.
I spent 5 days in the cardiac unit before they let me go home. 5 days of constant monitoring, medication adjustments, and what felt like an endless parade of specialists. A nutritionist came to discuss heart-healthy eating. A physical therapist explained the limitations I'd need to follow. A psychiatrist stopped by to assess my mental health. Ironic, considering anxiety had been the original misdiagnosis. Dr. Chen visited every morning during his rounds, checking my charts, asking detailed questions about how I felt. Unlike the first ER doctor, he never dismissed anything I said. If I mentioned a twinge or an unusual sensation, he took notes. He treated me like my observations about my own body mattered. "You're going to become an expert on your own heart," he told me on day 3. "Most people never have to think about their heartbeat, their blood pressure, their circulation. You're going to be hyper-aware of all of it, and that's actually good. That awareness could save your life." When I finally got discharged, I left with a plastic bag full of pill bottles, beta blockers, antiplatelet medication, statins, and a list of restrictions that felt like they'd just crossed out my entire life. No strenuous exercise, no heavy lifting, no stressful situations. Attend all follow-up appointments, report any symptoms immediately. "How am I supposed to avoid stress?" I asked Dr. Chen during my discharge meeting. "I'm a college student with a part-time job and bills to pay." "You're going to have to make some changes," he said gently. "This is about priorities now, Kathy. Your health has to come first, even when that's inconvenient or scary." The first week home was brutal. Not physically, the medications were managing my symptoms well, but mentally. I'd dropped my course load to part-time, which meant I'd graduate later than planned. Derek had been sympathetic when my mom called to explain what happened, but he'd had to fill in my shifts with someone more reliable. I was officially on unpaid medical leave with no clear timeline for returning. Our apartment felt different, smaller somehow. My mom had rearranged her schedule to work mostly day shifts so she could be home with me at night. She watched me constantly with barely concealed worry, jumping up every time I shifted position on the couch or took a deep breath. "Mom, I'm okay," I said on the 3rd day after catching her staring at me for the 5th time that hour. "I know," she said, but her voice cracked. "I just keep thinking about what could have happened, what almost happened. But it didn't. I'm here. I'm okay." Except I wasn't, not really. I was terrified. Every sensation in my chest made me wonder if it was happening again. Another dissection, another cardiac event. I checked my pulse obsessively, counting beats, feeling for irregularities.
I'd wake up in the middle of the night in a panic, convinced something was wrong, only to realize my heart was beating normally and I'd just been dreaming. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been misdiagnosed with anxiety, and now I actually had anxiety about my heart, about my health, about my future. My first small victory came 2 weeks after discharge, during a follow-up appointment with Dr. Chen. He ordered another echocardiogram to see how the dissection was healing, and afterward, he showed me the images side by side, the initial one from the hospital and the new one. "See this?" he said, pointing to the screen. "The tear is already showing signs of healing. Your artery is beginning to repair itself. This is exactly what we want to see." Relief washed over me so intensely I started crying right there in his office. "So, I'm getting better?" "You're healing, yes. It's going to take time, months, not weeks, but your body is doing what it needs to do. The medications are working, and you're following the protocols. You're doing everything right, Kathy." Those words meant everything. After weeks of being told I was wrong about my own body, having a doctor confirm I was doing something right felt like winning the lottery. I started researching SCAD obsessively, joining online support groups for survivors. That's where I discovered I wasn't alone. There were thousands of women, mostly young, who'd experienced the same dismissals, the same misdiagnoses, the same fight to be taken seriously. Reading their stories was both comforting and enraging. One woman, Jennifer from Ohio, had been sent home from the ER 3 times before she collapsed at her daughter's soccer game. Another, Maria from Texas, had been prescribed anti-anxiety medication for 6 months before a routine physical revealed severe coronary damage. The pattern was consistent and infuriating. Young women with cardiac symptoms being told it was all in their heads. I started documenting my own experience, writing everything down in a journal my mom bought me, the timeline of symptoms, the dismissals, the eventual diagnosis. I didn't know what I'd do with it, but something about creating a record felt important. Maya visited regularly, bringing homework assignments from the one class we still shared and gossip from campus that felt like news from another planet. She'd sit on my bed, painting her nails or scrolling through her phone, just being present without making it weird or treating me like I was fragile. "You're handling this better than I would," she said one afternoon in early December. "I'm not handling it," I told her. "I'm just surviving day by day." "That's handling it, though. You're still here. You're still fighting." The second small victory came when I was able to walk to the corner store and back without chest pain. It was only 3 blocks, a distance I used to cover without thought, but now it felt like summiting Everest. My mom wanted to come with me, but I insisted on going alone.
The December air was cold and crisp, and I moved slowly, paying attention to my breathing and heart rate like Dr. Chen had taught me. When I made it back home, I stood on our front porch for a moment, my hand over my chest, feeling my heartbeat steady and strong. I'd walked 3 blocks. It was nothing. It was everything. Physical therapy started in mid-December. My therapist, Amanda, was in her 30s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She understood that I wasn't a typical cardiac patient, no decades of unhealthy lifestyle to reverse, no previous heart attack to recover from. I was young and my body should have been resilient, but SCAD had made everything complicated. "We're going to rebuild your confidence in your body," she told me during our first session. "Right now, you're afraid of it, afraid it's going to betray you again. We're going to teach it, and you, that it's capable of healing and strength." The exercises started absurdly simple. Seated leg lifts, gentle arm circles, walking in place for 30 seconds. Things I could have done in my sleep before November now left me slightly breathless and anxious. But Amanda celebrated every completed exercise like I'd won a championship. "See," she'd say, "your heart handled that just fine. It's stronger than you think." Slowly, incrementally, I began to believe her. Christmas came and went quietly. My mom and I couldn't afford much, but she bought me a new sketchbook and a set of fine-tipped pens.
I hadn't drawn anything since before the diagnosis, too exhausted and anxious to be creative. But that night, I sat at our kitchen table and sketched for the first time in weeks. My hands shook a little, and the lines weren't as confident as they used to be, but something loosened in my chest that had nothing to do with my damaged artery. This, creating something, expressing myself through art, was still mine. SCAD hadn't taken everything. By early January, 2 months post-diagnosis, I was cleared to return to one class if I felt ready. Just one, Dr. Chen emphasized. Nothing stressful, nothing with rigid deadlines I couldn't be flexible about. I chose a studio art elective, something purely creative, with no pressure. Walking onto campus that first day back felt surreal. Students rushed past me to their various classes, complaining about workload and professors and normal college problems. I moved through them slowly, carefully, aware of every heartbeat, carrying nitroglycerin tablets in my pocket just in case. The art studio was on the second floor, and I took the stairs one at a time, resting halfway up. A few months ago, I would have bounded up 2 at a time without thinking. Now, reaching the top felt like an achievement. Professor Williams, a woman in her 60s with paint-stained hands and wild gray hair, welcomed me warmly. She knew about my medical situation, the school had been informed, and had promised flexibility with attendance and deadlines. Just create when you can, she told me via email. Art is healing. Use it however you need. That first class, we worked with watercolors, exploring color theory through abstract expression. I painted without thinking, letting my brush move instinctively across the paper. Blues and grays for the fear, red for the pain, yellow for the small moments of hope. When I stepped back to look at what I'd created, I was surprised to find it wasn't entirely dark. There was light in it too, threading through the darker colors, persistent and growing. "That's powerful," Professor Williams said, appearing beside me. "What's it called?" I looked at the painting, at the interplay of shadow and light, damage and healing. "Persistence," I said. Because that's what this was. Every medication I took, every appointment I attended, every small exercise I completed, every moment I chose to keep fighting, it was all persistence. I was learning to live with a broken heart. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, that heart was learning to heal.
February arrived with unseasonably warm weather and a false sense of security. I'd been doing well, really well. My follow-up appointments showed continued healing. I'd added a second class to my schedule, and physical therapy was progressing ahead of expectations. Amanda had even cleared me to try light jogging, something I'd been terrified to attempt. I felt like I was reclaiming my life, piece by careful piece. That confidence shattered on a Wednesday afternoon in the middle of the month. I was at physical therapy, midway through a session that had been going perfectly. We'd progressed to using resistance bands, and I was feeling strong, capable, almost normal. Amanda stepped away to help another patient, and I decided to do one more set of exercises before taking a break. That's when I felt it. A sensation I'd hoped never to feel again. That horrible, familiar pressure in my chest, but sharper this time, more intense. My left arm went numb. The room tilted. "Amanda!" I called out, hearing the panic in my own voice. She was beside me instantly, helping me sit, checking my pulse. Her professional calm couldn't quite hide the worry in her eyes. "Talk to me, Kathy. What are you feeling?" "Chest pain. Bad. My arm." "Okay, stay with me. I'm calling 911. "No, maybe it's just—" I started. But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't nothing. This was exactly what had brought me to the hospital the first time, except now I knew what it meant. The ambulance arrived within minutes. The EMTs knew my history. It was in their system from my previous admission. They treated it as the emergency it was, not questioning or dismissing. Small mercy.
County General's ER staff recognized me immediately. Within 20 minutes of arrival, I was back in a cardiac bay, hooked up to monitors, Dr. Chen being paged emergently. The attending physician, Dr. Morrison, ordered immediate tests while we waited. My mom arrived before Dr. Chen did, breathless and pale, still wearing her work scrubs. "What happened? They said you collapsed at physical therapy." "I didn't collapse," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just chest pain. They're being cautious." But we both knew it was more than caution. The way the nurses moved with controlled urgency, the frequency of vital checks, the worried glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. This was serious. Dr. Chen strode in 40 minutes later, his usual calm demeanor slightly frayed. He reviewed my charts, examined me, studied the new EKG results with an expression I couldn't read. "Kathy, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You've had another dissection. Different location this time, your right coronary artery. The original dissection in your LAD is still healing well, but this is a new event." The words felt unreal. Another one. After everything I'd done right, all the medications, all the precautions, all the lifestyle changes, my body had betrayed me again. "How is that possible?" my mom asked, her voice shaking. "She's been following every single protocol. She hasn't done anything strenuous. She's taking all her medications exactly as prescribed." "I know," Dr. Chen said gently. "And that's the frustrating reality of SCAD. We don't fully understand what triggers it. Sometimes it happens despite doing everything right. The exercise at physical therapy wasn't too intense. This would have happened regardless. Sometimes SCAD just recurs." "So what does this mean?" I asked, fighting back tears. "Am I going to keep having these? Is this just going to keep happening until—" "We're going to admit you again, do another catheterization to assess the extent of this new dissection, and adjust your treatment plan. Some SCAD patients do experience recurrence, but many don't. We need more data to understand your specific case." I felt everything I'd built over the past 3 months crumbling. All those small victories, all that progress, all that hope, gone in an instant. I wasn't healing. I wasn't getting better. I was just waiting for the next time my heart decided to tear itself apart. The second hospital admission was worse than the first. This time, I knew what all the machines meant, understood the implications of every test result, recognized the looks on nurses' faces when numbers weren't what they should be. Ignorance was a blessing the first time around. Knowledge was torture now. The catheterization the next day revealed a moderate dissection in my right coronary artery. Not as severe as the first one, Dr. Chen explained, but significant enough to require close monitoring and potential intervention if it didn't heal on its own. "We're going to increase your medications and add another to help prevent future dissections. There's also something else I want to discuss. There's a research program at Stanford studying recurrent SCAD. They're looking at underlying causes, potential genetic factors, new treatment approaches. I think you'd be a good candidate." "Research program?" my mom asked. "You mean like experimental treatment?" "No, nothing experimental. They're just gathering data from patients like Kathy to better understand the condition. But they also have a multidisciplinary team, cardiologists, geneticists, psychologists who specialize in SCAD. They might be able to offer insights we can't provide here." I barely heard the details. I was too busy spiraling, imagining a future of endless hospital admissions, constant fear, never knowing when my heart would fail me again. What kind of life was that? What kind of future? That night, alone in my hospital room while my mom had gone home to shower and get fresh clothes, I hit my lowest point. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the monotonous beep of the heart monitor, and genuinely wondered if fighting was worth it. If this was going to be my existence, ping-ponging between brief periods of normalcy and cardiac catastrophe,
Maybe giving up would be easier. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Heard you're back in the hospital. Want company?" I should have said no. I was in no mood for visitors, for forced cheerfulness, for anyone trying to make me feel better about the unfairness of it all. But I found myself typing back. "Sure." She showed up an hour later with a bag from Taco Bell. Contraband, since I was supposed to be on a heart-healthy diet, but I didn't have the energy to care. We sat together, her perched on the edge of my bed, eating tacos that tasted like cardboard in my mouth. "This sucks," she said finally, never one to dance around difficult topics. "Yeah. Like, really, really sucks. Apocalyptically sucks." Despite everything, I felt my lips twitch into almost a smile. Apocalyptically? I'm trying out a new vocabulary, SAT prep. But seriously, Kathy, this is so unfair. You don't deserve this. "Nobody deserves this," I said quietly. "But here we are." "Here we are," she echoed. Then, after a pause, "You remember freshman year when you tried out for the school musical even though you can't sing?" I blinked at the non sequitur. "What? Yeah, I guess. Why?" "You were terrible, like objectively horrifically bad. But you got up there and sang your heart out anyway, and when you didn't get a part, you signed up to do set design instead. You didn't let being bad at something stop you from being involved." I'm not sure where you're going with this. My point is, you've never been a quitter. Even when things are hard, even when you're not good at something or it doesn't go your way, you find another angle. You adapt. This heart thing, yeah, it's way bigger than a stupid musical audition, but you're still you. You're still that person who finds a way forward. I wanted to argue, to point out that this was different, that you couldn't just find another angle when your body was actively trying to kill you. But something about her words cracked through the despair I'd been drowning in. She was right. I'd never been a quitter. Even at my most invisible, my most forgettable, I'd always found ways to persist. I'd survived my dad leaving, survived financial hardship, survived being dismissed and misdiagnosed. I'd made it this far. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maya, I'm so scared. What if this keeps happening? What if next time—" "Then we deal with next time when it comes," she said firmly. "But right now, tonight, you're alive. You're here. And that's enough." Over the next few days, as I recovered from the second dissection, I had a lot of time to think. Dr. Chen's words about the Stanford program kept circling back. Maybe I did need specialists who understood SCAD better here. Maybe there were answers I wasn't getting. But more than that, I realized something important. I'd been measuring my recovery by whether or not I could return to my old life, the same schedule, the same activities, the same future I'd imagined before all this happened. But that person, that life, didn't exist anymore. That Kathy died in a college hallway last November. The question wasn't how to get back to who I was. The question was who I could become, despite or maybe because of what had happened to me. On my 5th day in the hospital, Dr. Chen came by with paperwork for the Stanford program. "No pressure," he said, "but I think it could help. They're doing some cutting-edge work with recurrent SCAD patients." I looked at the forms, at my mom sitting in the chair beside my bed, at the monitors tracking every beat of my treacherous heart. And I said, "Okay, let's do it." Because giving up wasn't an option, not when I'd fought this hard to survive. My heart might have been trying to kill me, but I wasn't going down without exhausting every possible option, every avenue, every chance at life. The setback had knocked me down, but I was getting back up. That's what survivors do. The Stanford Medical Center was nothing like County General. Everything gleamed with cutting-edge technology and quiet efficiency. My first appointment was in late March, 3 weeks after my discharge from the second hospitalization. My mom took time off work to drive me the 6 hours north, both of us nervous about what we'd find. Dr. Sarah Mitchells, the head of Stanford's SCAD research program, was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes and an energy that made you feel like you were the most important patient she'd ever seen. She spent 2 hours with me that first day, going through my entire medical history, asking questions nobody had thought to ask before. "Tell me about your life before the first dissection," she said. "Not just the symptoms, everything. Your routine, your stress levels, your sleep, your relationships, your goals." So I told her about community college and my design aspirations, about working at the coffee shop and worrying about money, about my absent father and my exhausted mother, about being invisible, forgettable, always putting everyone else's needs before my own. Dr. Mitchells listened intently, taking notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a moment. "Kathy, I'm going to tell you something that might sound strange. In our research, we're finding that many young women with SCAD share certain psychological patterns. They're often perfectionists, people pleasers, individuals who internalize stress rather than expressing it. They ignore their own needs, push through pain, and dismiss their own instincts in favor of what others tell them." I felt exposed, like she'd just read my diary. "That sounds like every woman I know." "Exactly," she said, "which is part of why SCAD is so underdiagnosed and understudied. We've been conditioned to dismiss women's pain, and women have been conditioned to dismiss their own needs. But here's the breakthrough we're seeing in our research. Learning to advocate for yourself, to set boundaries, to trust your body's signals, these aren't just good life skills. For SCAD patients, they might be medically necessary." "You're saying my personality could trigger dissections?" "I'm saying that chronic stress, suppressed emotions, and autonomic nervous system dysregulation may play a role in SCAD events. We're still studying it, but the data is compelling. Your body was sending you warning signals for weeks, and you, like so many young women, were taught to ignore those signals, to power through, to not make a fuss." The words hit me like a physical blow, because they were completely true. I'd spent my entire life trying to be low maintenance, not a burden, easy to deal with. Even when I was literally dying, I'd apologize for calling an ambulance. "So what do I do?" I asked. "We treat this holistically. Yes, medication and cardiac monitoring, but also therapy to help you learn to honor your body's needs, stress management techniques, learning to say no, setting boundaries, building a life where you're not constantly in fight or flight mode." Over the next 2 months, I became part of Stanford's program. I traveled up once a month for appointments, video called with their team weekly, worked with a therapist who specialized in chronic illness. I learned that healing wasn't just about my arteries repairing themselves. It was about rebuilding my entire relationship with my body, my stress, my life. The therapy was harder than any physical challenge I'd ever faced. Dr. Lisa Park, my psychologist, made me confront patterns I'd spent 19 years developing. The way I automatically said, "I'm fine," even when I wasn't. How I'd rather suffer in silence than ask for help. My deep-seated belief that my needs were less important than everyone else's. "Your heart didn't just randomly tear," Dr. Park said during one session. "Your whole system was under siege. Financial stress, academic pressure, emotional suppression, a lifetime of minimizing your own pain. SCAD was your body's way of forcing you to stop and pay attention." So I gave myself a heart condition by being too stressed? No, SCAD is a physical condition with complex causes. But learning to manage stress, to advocate for yourself, to trust your instincts, these things can help prevent recurrence. Think of it as removing fuel from a fire. The fire is already there, but you can control some of what feeds it. I started practicing saying no. Small things at first. Maya asking me to go to a party when I was tired. My mom asking me to run an errand when I needed to rest. Each no felt selfish, wrong, like I was being difficult.
But Dr. Park reminded me that boundaries weren't selfish, they were survival. The biggest breakthrough came in May during a group session with other SCAD survivors at Stanford. There were 8 of us, ages ranging from 23 to 41 years old, all women, all with similar stories of being dismissed and misdiagnosed. One woman, Rachel, was a surgeon who'd had her first dissection in the OR during a complex procedure. I went back to work 2 weeks later because I didn't want to seem weak. I had a second dissection a month after that. Another, Jennifer, was training for a marathon when her dissection happened. Everyone kept telling me I was so healthy, so fit. How could I have a heart condition? But I was also working 60 hours a week, going through a divorce, and hadn't slept properly in months. Each story echoed my own. Women who'd been pushing too hard, ignoring warning signs, prioritizing everything except themselves. Women who'd been taught that their pain didn't matter, that they should be grateful for medical attention rather than demanding it. We have to rewrite the narrative, Dr. Mitchell's told us, not just for ourselves, but for every young woman who's going to walk into an ER with chest pain and be told it's anxiety. Your stories matter. Your voices matter. Something shifted in me during that session. I realized that my experience, as painful and terrifying as it had been, gave me something valuable: knowledge, perspective, a platform, however small, to advocate for change. I started writing seriously, documenting not just my medical journey, but the systemic issues that had nearly killed me. I wrote about medical gaslighting, about how young women's pain is dismissed, about the gaps in cardiac care for conditions like SCAD. I started a blog, then an Instagram account sharing my story. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of women reached out with similar experiences. Chest pain dismissed as anxiety, symptoms ignored, instincts overruled by doctors who knew better. Some had been diagnosed with SCAD eventually. Others were still fighting for answers.
By June, 6 months after my second dissection, my follow-up tests showed significant improvement. Both dissections were healing well. My medication was working. More importantly, I was different. Stronger. Not in the physical sense. I still had to be careful, still had limitations, but in the way I moved through the world. I'd learned to trust myself, to advocate fiercely for my own health, to recognize that surviving wasn't just about medicine. It was about building a life worth living, even with limitations. I reduced my course load permanently, accepting that I'd graduate later than planned. I found a remote design internship that let me work flexible hours from home. I started setting boundaries with people, saying no without apologizing, asking for help without shame. My relationship with my mom deepened. She started seeing a therapist too, working through her own guilt about not recognizing how sick I'd been sooner. We learned to communicate better, to support each other without codependency. Maya and I remained close, but different. She respected my boundaries now, understood when I needed to cancel plans, and never made me feel guilty for prioritizing my health. Most importantly, I learned that having a broken heart, both literally and figuratively, didn't make me broken. It made me human. It made me real. It made me someone who'd survived something that should have killed her and came out the other side determined to help others do the same. Standing in Stanford's research center 1 year after my diagnosis, participating in a panel discussion about SCAD awareness for medical students, I looked out at the audience and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. "My name is Kathy Williamson," I said into the microphone. "I had a heart attack at 19, and 3 different doctors told me it was anxiety. I'm here today not because the medical system saved me, but because I saved myself by refusing to stop fighting for answers." I told them my story, all of it. The dismissals, the fear, the anger, the setbacks, the the slow climb back to a life that looked different than I'd planned, but was mine nonetheless. Listen to your patients, especially young women, especially when they tell you something feels wrong, because that feeling, that instinct, might be the only thing standing between them and tragedy. The applause was loud, but what mattered more were the students who approached me afterward, promising to remember, to do better, to listen. I'm 20 now. I still have SCAD. I probably always will. I take medication daily, see Dr. Mitchell's regularly, live with limitations that frustrated me less as I've learned to accept them. I have good days and bad days. I still get scared sometimes, still check my pulse obsessively, still worry about recurrence. But I'm also thriving in ways I never did before. I'm building a career as a patient advocate and designer. I'm using my art to raise awareness about cardiac conditions in young women. I'm living authentically, setting boundaries, honoring my needs. My heart tried to kill me, but it also taught me how to truly live. And I'm grateful for every single beat.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.